Noir Plasma Chrome Bleed. Unlocking knowledge, inspiring innovation, empowering curious minds.
This website makes learning so easy. I found all my resources here.
Like what you share.
Right, let's just dive straight into this. How exactly did a young princess, stripped of her royal titles and locked away in the terrifying Tower of London, manage to survive and trigger one of the greatest cultural explosions in human history? It's a story that sounds like a Hollywood thriller, but it is completely real.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to demystify the Elizabethan Golden Age. You know, we often think of this era as just a spontaneous stroke of luck, like a sudden blooming of poetry and wealth. But today, we're going to look at the history to see it for what it really was, a highly calculated result of extreme political survival. Here is our roadmap for This Explainer. We'll start with surviving the Tudor chaos, move into pragmatism and the crown, explore the cult of the Virgin Queen, look at the resulting English Renaissance, and then wrap it all up with the legacy of this golden age.
All right, part 1. Surviving the Tudor chaos. A childhood of peril.
Just look at the sheer speed and intensity of this timeline. It is wild. Elizabeth was only 2 years and 8 months old when her mother Anne Boleyn was beheaded by order of her own father, King Henry VIII. Boom, immediately declared illegitimate. By her teenage years, she's caught up in the dangerous scheming of Thomas Seymour. He's beheaded in 1549. And by 1554, she's imprisoned in the Tower of London by her half-sister Queen Mary for suspected rebellion. She learned incredibly early on how to navigate a deadly political minefield where a single wrong word could literally cost you your head.
So how do you survive that kind of chaos? Well, she armed herself with a world-class humanist education. To counter the brutality all around her, she developed an intense, almost relentless intellectual focus. Taught by brilliant minds, she learned to speak multiple languages so fluently that a Venetian ambassador later claimed each one appeared to be her native tongue. She was translating complex classical texts by Cicero and Tacitus for fun. Actually, a translation of Tacitus discovered just a few years ago in 2019 was confirmed to be in her own handwriting. She wasn't just learning, she was building the intellectual armor she would absolutely need to rule.
Moving on to Section 2, Pragmatism and the Crown, a calculated reign.
Taking the throne at age 25, she inherited a fractured, impoverished realm reeling from the religious whiplash of her half-siblings. And her ruling philosophy for dealing with this is perfectly captured right here in her personal motto, Video et teteo, I see and keep silent. This reveals a ruler who favored careful observation over the impulsive tyrannical fanaticism of her predecessors. While her father and sister used brute force, Elizabeth preferred to watch, calculate, and wait.
That pragmatism birthed what we call the via media, or the middle way. She established a Protestant church to satisfy the reformers, sure, but she deliberately kept Catholic elements like crucifixes and ornate vestments. She cared way more about outward loyalty than policing her subjects' souls. By doing this, she essentially sidestepped the bloody religious civil wars that were actively tearing apart neighboring countries like France.
Which brings us to Section 3, Cult of the Virgin Queen, a masterful PR campaign.
Despite the stability she was building, she faced this immense, terrifying pressure to marry and name a successor. But think about the impossible trap she was in here. If she married a foreign prince, England could become a vassal state. If she married an English nobleman, it could spark a civil war. If she named an heir, she risked a coup. So what did she do? She flipped the script. She used marriage negotiations as a genius foreign policy tool, dangling alliances to keep rivals at bay, before eventually declaring she was married only to her subjects. And then she transformed that unmarried status into a legendary PR campaign. enter the cult of Gloriana. Writers, poets, and painters were encouraged to elevate her into a near mythological figure, a virgin goddess under divine protection. And this wasn't just royal vanity. It was a deeply strategic political iconography designed to secure absolute loyalty and project massive national power in the face of hostile neighbors.
And that incredibly strategic bedrock takes us to Section 4, the English Renaissance, a cultural explosion.
This cultivated stability acted as the exact catalyst for a massive cultural boom. But notice the stark difference here. While the Italian Renaissance from a century prior is famous for its visual arts, think Da Vinci and Michelangelo, the English Renaissance was completely different. Fueled by humanist ideas, the printing press, and a demand for vernacular English, this Renaissance didn't focus on painting. Instead, it poured its absolute genius into the written word and song.
The crowning architectural achievement of this literary boom arrived in 1599. That is the year the iconic Globe Theatre was constructed in Southwark. It featured this unique thrust stage that pushed right out into the audience, creating an incredibly intimate, immersive vibe. This physical space directly shaped how playwrights actually wrote their dramas, encouraging these deep soliloquies and direct audience interaction.
And among the intellectual architects of this age, look at this lineup. We have Shakespeare shifting theater towards secular human experience. You have Edmund Spenser, who literally authored the epic propaganda that fueled the cult of Gloriana. You've got Richard Hooker, providing the theological defense for her moderate church, and her old tutor Roger Ascham, setting the gold standard for education. Together, they built the entire intellectual framework of the era.
Finally, Section 5, Legacy of a Golden Age, a Complex Era. As we look at the end of her 44-year reign in 1603, we really have to look at the nuanced legacy she left behind.
The term Golden Age gets thrown around a lot, but the reality is super complex. Yes, the era brought immense national confidence, capped by the stunning defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588. Francis Drake circumnavigated the globe, and literacy skyrocketed. But we absolutely must acknowledge that this era also saw the grim, dark foundations of the transatlantic slave trade under men like John Hawkins, voyages Elizabeth actually co-sponsored. Plus, her late reign was plagued by real economic struggles and military issues.
So, considering the bloody chaos she inherited, the fragile stability she engineered, and the lasting art she inspired, I'm going to leave you with this thought to ponder. Was the Elizabethan Golden Age a reality for all who lived it? Or was it simply the most successful, highly calculated public relations campaign in royal history? Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer, and keep questioning the history you think you know.
Like what you shared.
This website makes learning so easy. I found all my resources here.
Noir Plasma Chrome Bleed. Unlocking knowledge, inspiring innovation, empowering curious minds.